These tunes are great already. Loving it. Can everyone hear me okay? Good morning, good evening. Yeah, awesome. And is the music at a reasonable level so you can just hear it but doesn't drown out things? So, good evening, good morning to everyone. Thank you for coming by. It's Saturday night. What better things to do than just to hang out and listen to me drone on about some .NET development stuff, hey? Alright, sorry, I'm just rearranging my desk slightly behind the scenes while I get my things together and make sure that the stream's going okay and not buffering, etc. We truly have no lives. Yeah, tell me about it, Sim. I'm in exactly the same boat. Alright, let's press the magic face button. Can you guys see me okay? Yep, there we go. Alrighty. Run, I know. Good evening. So, step one, as always, we must discuss the beverage of the evening. Tonight I am back on my Dong Ding Oolong from T2. I felt the need for a green this evening because, I don't know, I had a little bit of a sore stomach after lunch. I'm not sure why that was. So green tea is good for settling that down. So cheers. Remember, hacking without tea is very uncivilized. Oh yeah, so good. Movie nights. John Milkspill. I kind of vaguely know that name, but I don't know why. Yeah, I know. So I've got the green screen thing happening. You can see, like, just out of the corner. Hang on, let me get my bearings out. That side there. There's a little bit filtering through because I just haven't got the crop going. But yeah, okay, cool. Yep, I certainly recognise that name. Thanks for coming in, mate. So this evening what are we going to do? We're going to talk about a couple of things. One in particular is quite dear to my heart and is something that we need to cover off probably now before we start diving into code. I don't know whether we'll start hitting actual code this evening. We might dabble in a couple of things, but as we know, the point of this is to go through the design process and the thought process and make sure that we cover off all the bits and pieces that we need to before we start writing code so that we're aware of as many pitfalls and whatnot as possible. Now, the first thing that I'm going to hit, in fact, what I'll do is I'll just flick over to my VMware. There we go. Can you guys see that? There we go. Whoops. You can see that. Good evening, Jay, Lucas, Tim, John, Goob, Geckham, Null, everybody. Sorry if I missed you. But yeah, everyone. Miss Mint! Well. Very nice to see you in here. Thank you for joining in. You may get sick of the sound of my voice, mate. But yeah, that's very nice to see more faces in here. So how many we got? What do we got? We got on a Saturday night. We've got 20 people already paying attention. Isn't that wonderful? Right, so I've got just a few little points of agenda on screen, and I tweeted about these a couple of days ago, and this was off the back of a couple of discussions that I had behind the scenes with a couple of individuals, some of which were offering suggestions and some of which were talking about what we should be doing down the track and things that we should try and plan for and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I wanted to talk about this pretty much now and up front, because it's important. Has the music just stopped? It's buffering. Come on, Monster Cat, give me the sounds. Give me the tunes. Yeah, I can. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking at the thing behind the scenes, and it looks like it's just been. It may just kick in again. If it's not kicking in again in just a minute, I'll give it a kick. So yeah. Anyway, the three things that I guess I want to talk about in general here are over-engineering, i.e., that we've got to do this thing just in case, versus future-proofing, versus premature optimization. And a lot of these things are related, but they're not exactly the same thing. So yeah, Foob, you didn't miss anything, mate. The usual bootstrapping nonsense that I come out with. So, man, the music in this song is a little bit loud. I've got to wind that back just a little bit so I can hear myself think. Yeah, so it is a really, really common thing for developers and non-developers or anyone really that's responsible for building a non-trivial system to have a think about what it is they're going to need down the track and how much effort they're going to have to put in up front to manage all of the things that they think they're going to need. And I'm going to give you what I believe to be a canonical example of this that I've seen during my dev life on so many different occasions. And that is database abstraction. Now, this has thankfully become less of an issue over the last, 10 years or so. But prior to that, this thing happened all the time, right? So you'd go and work on a system, and this system might be, it's a product that you're going to deploy in a bunch of client environments. It's not necessarily something that's going to live in the cloud, for example. And so you sit there and you think to yourself, right, so we want our clients to be able to use this to integrate with all this other fancy stuff that they might have on site. We want them to be able to plug and play various bits and pieces, and really importantly, we want to make sure that they can run our software on whatever database system they currently have. So what we need to do is we need to abstract the mechanism that we're using to talk to the database. So that means we have this generic sort of data abstraction layer. And behind the scenes, there's like a implementation specific thing. And if we're talking to Oracle, well, then we'll have some Oracle code that talks to Oracle and does bits and pieces. And if it's SQL Server, we'll have a SQL Server implementation and blah, blah, blah. And we'll do the same for, MySQL. And maybe down the track, when someone's stupid enough to deploy Mongo, we'll have some ridiculous abstraction that will allow us to poke things in Mongo. So a lot of people in the past have spent a significant portion of their development time building abstractions that are supposed to allow for a client to go, well, I want to swap out SQL Server and chuck MySQL in or something like that. The amount of effort that goes into that level of abstraction is actually really hard, particularly if you start going across different types of databases. So if you're sticking just to relational, you're going to get sort of instance-specific quirks because Oracle doesn't behave exactly the same as SQL Server. And MySQL is slightly different. And, there's all these sort of little nuances and these little flavors. And before you know it, you sort of spend a lot of time working on implementation-specific hacks and blah, blah, blah. So a lot of engineering effort goes into this. And generally one thing happens. A client will say, what do you reckon we should run this on? You'll go, it's got to be SQL Server, and that's what they'll use, and they'll never ever swap it out. So you end up investing all of this time into code that you've abstracted and over-engineered and whatnot, and no one really ever uses it. Now, on the sort of other end of that is you don't abstract things enough, and you end up really sort of tying yourself down to a specific platform. And I'm not advocating for either end of that scale. So, but what I guess I'm trying to highlight here is that we don't need to build, and we will not build, the biggest, shiny, all singing, all dancing, overly abstracted, over-architected, over-engineered implementation of what Meterpreter could possibly be on the CLR. That's not the goal. So what we're doing, or what we need to do while we're building our code, is constantly ask ourselves, do we need to do this? Is this absolutely necessary? What is this thing going to give us down the track? What is it going to take away? Is that going to provide enough functionality for us to justify the pain of having to maintain that thing? Is it worth over-engineering a layer of abstraction when realistically we're never going to need to provide multiple implementations of a thing? So this is what I want everyone who's joining in on this stream and future streams to be thinking is, do we really need to do that? What is the simplest thing that could possibly work? And that's what we're going to do. We're not going to make a mess. We're not just going to make everything incredibly coupled. We will obviously put a lot of effort into making sure that we organize our code in a way that makes a lot of sense. But we can't sit here right now and go, right, out of the box, I've got to abstract all of these things, and that's the way we're going to go ahead and build it, because we end up sort of revisiting these things and changing things so much anyway. And as I said, in most cases, those abstractions tend to be very unnecessary. Where they're not unnecessary, they'll probably be really obvious. And we'll hit those sort of as we go. The KISS method is the best. It absolutely is. You know, you can, like, if you look at a standard Hello World example that came out of, where was it? It might have even been an Oracle example. And it had interfaces and abstract classes and concrete implementations and all this other bollocks. It was just ridiculous. The number of lines of code to print Hello World on screen was just insane. But basically, that's exactly what we're doing, is just like what Geffen just said. We want to go for an MVP. We want a minimum viable product. Fluxay, hey OJ, have you considered the legality of developing malware that can be used illegally and what liability that opens you up to? Apologies if this has been covered previously. Just something that's been on my mind. That's a really good question. So I think there's a number of answers to that. I'm in a spot right now where it's pretty easy to answer because Meterpreter already exists. It's not like I'm building something new. It's not like I'm coming up with a new transport or a new way of sort of hiding things. What we're doing is we're just re-implementing something that already exists on a different platform. So look, no, I'll be honest, I haven't in any way considered the legalities of this because I have already considered the legalities in the past. And at one point, you know, earlier on when I was helping Rapid7 with a few bits and pieces, there was a point where I wasn't sure that I should be pushing code to GitHub because there's that technically classed as exporting a weapon. But because it's open source, it's not. So there's a couple of things I'm going to be picky about in your question. So am I developing malware? I think that's pretty subjective. I would say no, we're not developing malware. We're building, you know, an implant. We're building an agent. But that is completely under the control of the person that uses it in exactly the same way that current implementations of Meterpreter are now. So there's nothing new there. Can it be used illegally? Absolutely. But what can't be used illegally? There's so many things that are... I mean, do you not release Vim because people write malware code in Vim? So, you know, this really... it's such a grey area, and it kind of tends to come down to intent. You know, I've empowered a lot of pen testers over the last however many years that I've been working on Meterpreter features to do some pretty fun stuff with their clients. I've no doubt empowered bad guys to do it as well. So, you know, I rationalize it by saying, you know, I'm constructing something that's going to help the good guys train and help the blue team so that they get better. And we sort of collectively improve the state of security as it currently stands. The bad guys are going to be bad regardless of what we give them. So, no, that's right. Maybe more people should be writing malware in Vim because then it wouldn't get deployed. So look, you know, we could talk about this for a significant period of time, Fluxay, and I'm not going to. But in short, I haven't considered it for this round. I don't think it exposes me to any more or less potential litigation that I may already be open to purely by the fact that I'm already contributing to this source base. So, yeah, that's basically how I feel. You are most welcome. It is a good question. It hasn't come up on this stream. In fact, I haven't been asked that around this sort of development stuff for quite some time. So it was definitely worth covering. I'm certainly not going to be pushing this out to anywhere illegal myself. So doing this kind of stuff on stream, I don't think is going to cause any grief for me. Plus, you know, at least in the security world, I'm already in some ways known for building these sorts of things. So if they're going to come after me, they've already got enough. They've already got enough to come after me with. So yeah, that's basically it. It'd be interesting if they had to try to regulate potentially malicious software. Well, they were trying to do that, weren't they? It wasn't Masanar or something else. Dual use software and all that other nonsense. I don't know. I'm not really good with the legal stuff. But you're right. Intent is a big part of this, and I'm not doing anything that I'm hiding, and I'm not doing anything really new other than just rebuilding it on a different platform. So yeah, I think I'm okay. But I appreciate the concern and I appreciate the question. I hope that is a sufficient answer for you, at least for us to be able to continue. But feel free to ask another question if you want me to dive into that just a little bit more. We could even just sit down and have a power about that on another stream. Bill Joy of Sun was going off on this years ago, restricting access to knowledge. Yeah. It's a really tough one to talk about, to be honest. There are so many shades of grey. There's nothing absolute, and to me it generally comes down to intent and everything for me being open. It's being open source, completely visible, and non-nefarious if used in the right way. But like I said, you can argue like don't make knives because people will use them poorly. Don't make Vim because they'll write code in it. Where is the line? When does something actually become malware? Waterfall or agile? Well, the beauty of this project that we're doing is we don't actually have any clients. No one's paying us to do this. We are basically our own client, and we can do it however the hell we like, which is great. But we do have to bear in mind that we're building this so that so many other people hopefully will learn from it and contribute to it over time. And this isn't just, I hope they contribute to the CLR version, but the understanding they get of how Meterpreter works and how it talks to Metasploit might allow them then to go ahead and contribute to Metasploit directly or to some of the other implementations, including Python and Native, etc. So yeah, that's basically where I fit on that. So, all right, so back to the kind of primary point. Over-engineering is something that I'm super conscious of for a number of reasons. Over-engineering not only overcomplicates things, it increases the time that it takes to get things built, and with more moving parts and more complexity, it's harder to reason about, it's harder to rationalize, it's harder to fully understand, and there's so many more moving parts that can break, right? And we're not just going to go, well, down the track we might need to implement X, so therefore I'm just going to put this in now, so that down the track I'm not going to have to refactor this sort of thing. G'day Vendetta, thanks for coming in, mate. It's good to see you. So I think that if there are some devs, and I know Jono's a dev, there's a couple of other people who I think have got dev histories on stream as well. They might find that some of the stuff that I'll do is abrasive, and it will be deliberately abrasive because I want us to think about it. And I want us to sit back and go, you know what, this is a concern or this isn't a concern. Should we redo it? Should we not? Should we just leave it as is? There's all of these things need to come up as we're building the code. And so I will, in many ways, intentionally incite some kind of emotional response out of those people who are watching. Now, what I might also caveat this with is whatever it is that we end up constructing probably won't be the best. It won't be the best. And if we can resign ourselves to the fact that software is never done and software is never perfect, then it sort of eases the pressure and we can focus on actually delivering things. And this is the first of those things that I want people to think about, particularly from a security background, in order to fully understand what a developer has to do in order to produce a complex system. That everything's a trade-off. You have time constraints and budget constraints and feature requests and all these other things that you've got to juggle. Now, in our scenario, we don't exactly have those things in the same way that a typical dev does, but we have them in some other ways. It's like, I'm not going to spend my life doing this. I'm happy to dedicate a number of hours over a number of months to get us to a point where we can push something up to Rapid7's GitHub and actually have a CLR implementation of Meterp. But I'm not going to spend my entire life on this thing. So there are some constraints in place. And so we've got to work within that. We'll discover more as we go, and we've already documented some other ones that we have to live with in the first stream. So, does this need to upgrade itself or be deployable on first cut? Can we have versions that are useless? That's I don't really know how to answer that question. As far as upgrading itself, do you mean it needs to be able to say, okay, we've got Meterpreter running, and then down the track when a new version of the CLR Meterp comes out, can it hot patch itself to the latest version? Is that what you meant? Peleus, welcome, sir. It's good to see you. And Melissa. Oh, Melissa. Give Melissa a squeeze for me. She's a gem. Okay, so the answer to that is no. The way things currently work with all the versions of Meterpreter is once it's running, it's running. There is a way around it, though. Kinda. So you can, if you have an instance of Meterpreter running on a target system, you can spin up another instance that when connects back to Metasploit gets a new copy of the DLLs that you are now using. So it's not necessarily a formal, hey, here's how you hot patch to the latest version of Meterpreter. It's more of a case of, hey, spin up another one that utilizes the same transports and you should be good. You can get away with that if you migrate as well. Is the plan for staged, unstaged, or both? We aim to provide support for both staged and stageless payloads. To begin with, we will focus on just staged, and then we will look to support the stageless versions after that. Okay, but we do, no, it wasn't covered in previous streams. Actually, it might have been briefly mentioned, but that's one of those things where we can sit here and go, okay, well, if we implement things this way, then it might make it easier for us to support the stageless version down the track. And we have to constantly ask ourselves, is that the right time? Should we be doing this? Should we not be doing this? And we all need to pitch in. We all need to go, yep, here's the pros and here's the cons. So let's pull the trigger on whatever method that we decide to go ahead with. Okay. So that's like over-engineering and just in case. Future-proofing is actually the good side, so we'll leave that by itself. Now this last one, premature optimization, has anyone heard of this term before? I'm sure the developers in the room have heard this term before, and can you give me an idea of what it means and why it might be a bad thing? Yes, I had a feeling you would, Jono. So why is it bad? What is it? Why is it bad? Don't build things you don't need immediately. Well, I would put that more in the just in case category and the over engineering potentially category. In my view, premature optimization is more of a case of supporting more than one data. Yeah, okay, so that is a premature optimization. That's a just in case scenario. For me, it would be more of a, okay, so right now we're looking to implement a feature. And there's 3 ways to implement that feature. And one of them is reasonable, it's easy to understand, and it's not necessarily the most, let's say, the most memory efficient or the fastest or whatever it happens to be. But there's this other one that we can spend a little bit more time on, and it uses quad hash trees and it reduces lookup times to sort of, 1 over log n or something like that. Let's do that because we know we're going to need that. That's the kind of stuff in particular that I'm talking about. Do we need to go to the nth degree on a particular feature to make sure it is the best, the fastest, the tiniest, the most amazing implementation of that one tiny thing? No, we don't. Particularly with something like this. So that's why I put premature optimization behind the scenes. You can go, okay, well, I've just thrown this stuff into a dictionary and that's fine. And when we do that en masse, it's a little bit slow. Do we then need to right now go in and say, right, we're going to produce our own hashing algorithm and we're going to create this epic data structure that will manage this stuff better in memory and, all of that sort of thing. So that's, in my humble opinion, what premature optimization is. It could, what it could be as well is that we know that we're going to need, we're going to be writing a lot of data to disk. So let's get a SAN and deploy a SAN. So that when it comes time, we know that we can write stuff to storage area network really fast. Like that's a premature optimization. Does that make sense? Do you guys agree with what I'm saying there? Is that reasonable? And why is that bad? I would presume you would mean don't let perfect be the enemy. Yeah, there is a bit of that. That's the perfectionist side of this is probably more to do with the premature optimization side. Does it have to be absolutely perfect? No, it does not. I mean, we'll strive for it. to the point where it makes sense, but we're not going to burn ourselves out on ultimate implementations when we really don't need to. What I might quickly chuck in here as well, premature optimization can generalize to how can you optimize before you've profiled. Thank you. That's really good. I agree with that. How can you optimize when you haven't profiled and you don't know what it is you actually need to optimize? So it's like putting tons of checks and balances in place too far ahead for actually getting the basis of your product down solid. Yeah, I think so. It's I tend to follow this sort of little philosophy, and I don't remember where I heard it. 1 is make it work. 2, make it good. 3, make it fast. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how fast it is if it doesn't work. And you can't really make it that fast if it isn't very good at what it does. So make it work, make it good, make it fast. So it's worth considering these things. Like a working implementation is better than a very fast broken implementation. And so we will be focusing on correctness to begin with. And with my personal preference of focusing on correctness, hopefully it will become very clear as to why I prefer languages that I have to work with the compiler more than I do the debugger. And that's going to be our goal here as well. We want to work with the compiler because that's upfront. It means we're dealing with types. It means that the compiler is going to prevent us from breaking at runtime. And the process of figuring out how things are and where they're broken and why should hopefully become easier. And this is, I think this is one of the biggest gripes that many people have when they go to languages like Haskell, because you spend like 99.9% of your time fighting the compiler when you're writing Haskell code. But when it compiles, it pretty much works. So is that worse than debugging it? I don't think so. I think it's a lot better. It stops you from deploying software that's busted. So that's a good thing in my opinion. Okay. So we're going to try to avoid over-engineering. We're going to try and avoid premature optimization. We're going to focus on just making it work. We're going to try to make it good after we've made it work. And then later on down the track, when we have highlighted bottlenecks and we're aware of some issues, from there we're going to make it fast. Now, what I'd like you guys to just keep in the back of your mind in one particular case is how are we going to handle TCP socket comms, and should we be doing asynchronous I/O or should we be using blocking sockets? That's something that could be argued as a premature optimization. Should we be using asynchronous network calls? The answer to that generally is yes. Should we do that? Let's have a think about that. It's something that's important to consider. In the case of HTTP related transports, we have basically no control over it, but for TCP transports we do, and we need to have a think about what that might look like. Need to change the mindset from fighting the compiler to work. Thank you. Okay, yep, I would agree with that. When I say fighting the compiler, maybe better understanding the compiler and working with the compiler is a better use of terms. Thank you. I mean, I don't feel like I'm fighting the compiler, to be honest. I feel like the compiler is helping me. It's preventing me from deploying terrible code. And that's exactly what we're hoping to have happen when we're building our CLR Meterpreter. Is there any questions around that? Future-proofing, I think, is a very different story. Like, there are obvious cases where you know a particular thing needs to function in a certain way. And if I can give you an example of that, sorting. Sorting is a good example of that. So, hang on, there's a couple of questions. I feel the compiler is preventing me from doing stupid things. Yes, exactly right. How do you draw the line between premature optimization and thinking ahead? Yes, well, this is really, really hard. And we'll come to that when it comes time to implement the TCP socket comms. We'll cover that in a little bit more detail. Now, what was the question I just asked? I should have typed this out because I've completely lost track of it. Over-engineering, premature optimization, future-proofing. Oh yeah, future-proofing. That's more of a case of knowing that something is going to need to be done better than, you know, the classic sort of example. So sorting. There is a famous quote. I don't know whether it was, I think it might have been Jeff Atwood. Jeff Atwood wrote a blog post, something along the lines of, everything is fast for small values of n. Okay, so the implication there is that almost every algorithm that you choose, the Stack Overflow guy, exactly. Almost every algorithm that you choose is going to be really, really fast when the data set size that you're using is tiny, right? So the reason why I'm choosing sorting is because there are some very well-known algorithms. So there's the bubble sort, there's the quick sort, there's the merge sort, the heap sort, the comb sort, there's the comb sort, cocktail sort. There is the bozo sort or bogo sort. They're the same thing. There's also the sleep sort. Is everyone familiar with these? Tim sort. Do you mean time? Hey Mongo, welcome to the stream, mate. Thanks for coming in again. So these, look, there are so many other sorting algorithms, and sorting is a really interesting topic, and there are a bunch of blog posts out there already that cover each one of these things. But there are a couple in here that are my favorites. I haven't heard of the Tim sort, not going to lie. I will have a look at that a little bit later on. But the one that I really want to bring up is the bozo sort. So the bozo sort is brilliant because it basically randomizes the entire data set and then checks to see if it's sorted. And if it's not, then it randomizes the order of the set again and then checks if it's sorted. So if you have a data set size of 2 elements, this is actually practical. You could get it first go and that'd be great. But if you've got 10 elements or 100 elements, then all of a sudden, you're going to end up waiting probably a very long time for the bozo or bogo sort to actually work. So the worst case scenario, this algorithm has a time complexity of infinity, right? O infinity, big O notation of infinity, which is clearly not good. Okay, so you wouldn't want to use it. But as I said, when you have a small enough data set size, this thing would work. It would be a bloody stupid choice, but it would work. Obviously, you want to look at more realistic sorts like these other ones, and the Tim sort, which, according to John, is the default sorting mechanism for Python. So, that's worth going to have a read about. So, there you go. Look at that. People are starting to share links to various sorting-related bits and pieces, which is great. I even wrote a bunch of blog posts on different sorting algorithms myself back in the good old day. But anyway, we're sort of getting slightly off track. What I wanted to highlight was there are so many different ways of doing a particular thing, and while you don't necessarily have to have the best, clearly you have to make some logical choice and say, at least for a relatively large data set, assuming that is part of your concern and it's part of the problem that you're looking to manage, then using something like a bogo sort equivalent would be a very bad idea. I didn't forget. Well, I guess I did forget. Insertion sort. So look, there are other ones as well. I'll even write down Tim sort. Thank you for the links, by the way, people. So yeah, some of these are really good, and many of these work well or better with certain types of data, and some that's like, for example, if some's randomized, then one sorting algorithm may be worse than another that might already be partially sorted, all that sort of stuff. So cat among the comp-sci pigeons. Yeah, I'm trying to be a good boy, John. So anyway, I'm just using that as an example. So we want to make, a pragmatic choice. We want to decide on a good option given what we know of the problem space without going too far with optimization and without avoiding going far enough. Good evening, Barney. That's you, isn't it, Jeff? Glad they let you off from banana bending. Banana bending. Okay, do we have any more questions about this stuff? Fire away at will. What I'm going to do is take a copy of... which one was it? It was the second one, wasn't it? Notes. Bring it here. And edit notes. Alright, so Lucky I have .NET, so probably won't have to implement any of these sorts ourselves. Exactly. Look, to be honest, sorting is not something I think we really ever have to do in Meterpreter. There is one thing that I had to build by hand, and that was a binary tree to manage pivoted sessions, and that is something that is going to be significantly easier in here, because we don't need to do anything else other than just use a hash table, because the GUIDs that represent the sessions, we'll just use them in a dictionary or something like that. So that's a classic case of we could over-engineer our own, but we could just use a built-in dictionary, which for our purposes will be more than enough. It's just the implementations of that sort of stuff behind the scenes for native Meterp. We wanted to have sort of portable and whatnot, and it was fun to build too. So that's basically where we're at. No, not fixing get system. That's going to remain broke. That's the first get system reference of the night. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so out of all of these bits and pieces, we've already covered off the TLV packets and what they look like. Off the back of that previous stream, we did talk. Hopefully, we did have hope about bringing on a person who knows something about why TLV packets became a thing and why they were chosen. And I said during that last stream, hey, I'll ask some folks behind the scenes who is responsible for coming up with the TLV packet option. And I had a feeling I knew who it was. Thank you, Bracktwitch, for following. Bracktwitch. That's what it looks like on screen. It's a long way over there. I can't read it. Thank you for the follow. So I asked Egypt and I asked HD. I asked them both at the same time in the hope that I would get an answer from one of them. And they both came back and said exactly what I thought it would be. It was Scape. So Matt Miller, who now works at Microsoft, was the original dev of Meterpreter v1. And there's a fantastic white paper on that exact thing, and I linked that in the notes for the previous stream. So go and have a look at the GitHub repo. There's a reference to a PDF that you can have a read of, and that explains, the TLV packets and the original implementation of Meterpreter's network handling and whatnot. So that was cool. So hey, Justin Kennedy's here too. Excellent. Thanks for coming in, man. There is a GitHub. Zorkat's going to be handling that. So yeah. Anyway, off the back of that, I mentioned to you guys, what would be cool is if we could get some people who worked on Meterpreter to come in and have a chat with us on stream, and we could fire some questions and that kind of thing, and I think that would be really great. So after hearing that Scape was the man who did the original implementation, I reached out to Scape and said, hey, would you be open to having a discussion with me about your time working on Meterpreter in front of a bunch of people live on a Twitch stream? And he said, sure, sounds fun. Now, he is a very busy guy, and he may well have said that just to satiate my desire to have an amazing nerd come and speak to everybody who's watching. So it may not happen. I'm not going to put pressure on the guy. He's, as I said, he's a busy lad, but he did seem keen. So fingers crossed that sometime in the not too distant future, we'll be able to spin up a stream and we'll have Scape sitting here talking to us about some of the rationale behind the design decisions and why he did what he did, and maybe we can quiz him about what he may have done differently and what he likes about it, what he doesn't like about it, some areas of the implementation that we didn't know he was responsible for. So what would be great, I think, if we could collectively put some questions together and we can jot those down so that if and when we get him on stream to have an interview with us, that we can get some pretty good answers out of him. So yeah, how cool is that? What the hell was I thinking when I did this moment? yeah, exactly that. I think that would be really cool. So fingers crossed that will happen. I hope that it'll happen. I'm fairly confident it'll happen, but I'm not going to promise because it's completely in Matt's court, and I don't want him to feel obliged. So he's I'm sure he's got better things to do than ramble to me. So we covered off the TLV protocol. Are there any questions around that? Hopefully the brief coverage that we did of it last stream was fairly simple. And the only thing I think that I failed to mention is once you had the packet on the wire, once you had the final sort of encrypted or unencrypted packet ready to go, that was literally just thrown as an object or as a stream of bytes, an array of bytes, pardon me, down the neck of whatever the current transport happens to be. Okay, and then Metasploit picks it up, does the reverse of the whole process, and off it goes. So the TLV stuff is fairly simple. It's fairly simple. It should be pretty easy to understand. But if there are any questions around that, then please let me know and we can dive into that, because that's clearly a fundamental part of what we're going to be doing. And one of the first pieces of the pie that we're going to be chowing into will be construction of packets. How do we create packets? How do we handle packets? So that will be fairly early on in the actual development phase of the stream, and that will be the same alongside building one of the transports and handling a few other sort of core bits and pieces like the command management mechanism. Oh, I just had another little ding in my ears. Someone else has followed. Twentum. I know that name from Twitter. Thank you for the follow, my friend. I appreciate you jumping on stream. This looks like it's the first time we've had a few more of the US-based folks who I don't usually see as well jumping on stream and having a chat with us, which is lovely. So thank you all for coming along. Now, what do you guys want to hit next? Like, is there something here that is particularly interesting to you that you want to dive into, or should we start looking at what I think is the next sort of most important piece of the pie? Bright and early, 5:45 a.m. You're in. I'm trying to remember where you are. I do know where you are. Obviously won't mention it on stream because that's a fail. What have we got here? Can you say hi to OJ from Will? Hey, Will! G'day, Will. A little rock climbing budding champion down south. I hope he's doing well. Will is a little legend. He and I, even though we've never met, we have this sort of mutual crush for climbing going on, and one day we're going to have a session together. So that's going to be cool. That's Barney's little fella. He's a gem. Midwest. That's right. You are Midwest. So yeah, take your pick. Do you want to dive into something that you guys have an interest in, or should we sort of start exploring what I think is probably the most worthy thing to dive in to begin with? We may end up even firing up a compiler. And this is where I have to pretend to be doing something else while the Twitch stream catches up and you guys have the opportunity to type in response. And then I've got to go, okay, are they typing or are they just silent, waiting for me to take the lead? Dev environment, setup. What do I think first? Well, those two things are pretty key. So dev environment setup is important, and we'll dive into that before we write probably a single line of code that is specific to this implementation. But what I think is really important is versioning. So this stuff. I think this is probably what we need to discuss up front, and we need to figure out exactly what kind of nuances we are going to face when we're deploying Meterpreter in an environment without knowing what version is running. So it's been a while since I've had to deal with multiple versions of the CLR. So we're going to learn this all together. Code. Are you aware of the idea of tracer bullet from pragmatic programming? Yes. Yes, I am. Do you want to share that? Saturday stream, Rasta. Yeah, I know. I'm doing it every 2 days, man, like I said. Greetings, Kilix. Thank you for coming. So look, I think we need to hit the version question. Now, in the backs of people's heads, I'm assuming that the vast majority of people are going to be probably going, well, we need to target .NET X or .NET Y for this reason. And there are probably people who have experienced some .NET code behind the scenes will be thinking, okay, well, you can get certain versions of binaries to run under certain other versions of the CLR if you have, the right application manifest and you have binding redirects and all that sort of stuff. And these are all really valid questions. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that sometimes we don't even know what's going to be running on the target, and we might need to figure that out on the fly. Now, do we construct one DLL to a particular version and do our best to try and get that version running on all possible platforms? Or are we going to have to go with, right, let's construct a core set of code, and we have a number of projects that have targets to specific versions of the CLR, and when we compile, the code that we've written is included in all of those projects. They're currently the two things that I'm thinking about. Okay, so let's say we go, I'm going to build 3 projects targeting .NET 2, .NET 3.5, and .NET 4.6, just for shits and giggles. Now, those first 2 are effectively the same CLR version, right? So it doesn't matter if I use version 3.5 related bits and pieces. If I avoid version 3.5 bits and pieces while targeting the 3.5 .NET framework, because it will compile down to the same stuff, which will run on .NET 2, but the .NET framework components that I may rely on as part of 3.5 won't be there on a .NET 2 machine. Okay, so this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky. We can detect the version of the CLR that we're running, but can we detect what level of functionality the .NET framework has available to us? Does that make sense? Do you do a Process Explorer method of checking what you're running on and extract that from resource section and run it? Well, that's one option, but we need to have some code running then, right? So here's where, okay, now we've got to get into Stagerland. How do we begin? We might have an executable, we might have a DLL. We don't know, do we? So we have to think about what that would mean for someone who is taking our executable and attempting to run it. We might need to have something else that stages on its behalf. In the case of ASPX code, like a web shell, that's significantly easier because we can actually write C# that's interpreted, and that interpreted C# can run on the fly on whatever CLR it's running, and we can detect the version, and from there we can go, okay, well, I might request version 4 of Meterpreter, or version 3.5, or version 2. Don't know. But I think what we need to do is we need to build some test code and run it under different configurations. At least that's what I think we should do. So we could just generate a hello world program for all of the different .NET framework versions, and we can try and run that on platforms that only have those versions installed. That would give us really good visibility of what runs and what doesn't. But before we go down that path, let's go and have a look at the .NET framework versions. Please fire your questions as we go. Do you... Oh, we've already answered that. Yeah, sorry. So we'll open that one. We'll open... Oh yeah, that's right. My mouse wheel doesn't do very well inside this virtual machine. Okay, look at that. How to determine which .NET Framework versions are installed. .NET Framework version history. These are all very interesting. Right, let's just have a look. Because what we're really interested in is which machines come by default with which version of the framework and all of that sort of stuff. I'm sure someone posted in one of the most recent streams which versions of the operating system came with which versions of the .NET framework. I might have to dig that out. With a staged version, is it possible to stage 1 a version checker that runs every version and the stage 2 becomes the appropriate version? Yes, I believe so. I believe so, depending on what that may look like. 4.5.2, yeah. Well, so these things are referring to, this list here is referring to compatibility, right? So .NET Framework will run on, at 4.5 will run on bloody XP, but it doesn't come by default, right? What does this say? Here we go. This looks a little bit more up our alley. Okay, so I think without having too much of a discussion with everybody, the idea of supporting .NET 1 is stupid. If you're able to target a machine that is running .NET 1.1, I would argue you should be using the native Meterpreter out of the box. You know, that's XP, all that sort of stuff. So I say we don't even consider .NET 1, right? .NET 1 just seems ridiculous. So we're not going to do that. In fact, I should probably maybe document this as part of a different file. Which version should we use? Don't you love that little shortcut? We are not going to use .NET 1.x. It's too old. Okay, there's just no point. We probably need to have any functionality above 3.5. That one was fairly complete already. So look, 3.5 is a really good choice for a base level of coverage. I mean, it's got good language features, it's got good .NET framework features. For the most part, you know, that is a really reasonable choice to target to begin with. The question then becomes, does it exist? Does it exist on a particular target? And this is where we really need to start having a bit of a play. So if you stumble across a Windows 10 desktop that's a fresh install of whatever latest version of Windows 10 happens to be, does it have direct support for .NET Runtime version 2? The answer may well just be yes. It might be no. It might be yes with some caveats. We might need to do a particular thing or something to get it running. So that's what we need to explore, I think, just a little bit more. So this is obviously talking about all of the features and the component updates and, you know, all that sort of nonsense, which is great. But look, to be honest, my humble opinion right now is if we build a version of Meterpreter that runs on CLR version 2, pretty much all the latest operating systems won't have that installed. So hang on, let's go. Maybe what we should do is go Windows 10 and .NET 2.0. So here you go. This is interesting. While using Windows 10, I found a lot of older programs won't install or run because they require a previous version of the framework. Okay, so by default, it's not present. And the last thing we want to do is fire off a Meterpreter payload and have, you know, hey, .NET Framework isn't installed. Do you want to install it? Message boxes appearing in front of people. So clearly it's available and you can easily whack it in, but it's not there by default. So we can't assume that we can target .NET 3.5 and have it work. But clearly we can assume that it has, hang on, where are we? Windows 10, we can assume it's got .NET 4.6. In fact, it's probably got 4 by default as well. But ultimately, I think to really know the answer to these questions, we need to have a Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows 10, blah, 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 default installation of all of these things sitting here so that we can go, right, let's see what these things do and how they work. We could probably read a lot of documentation and then make some assumptions. But yeah, I think it's probably worth going through the pain of actually playing with individual virtual machines and seeing what's available. I hope you have a valid MSDN license. I absolutely do. I don't pirate software. I haven't pirated software for a very, very long time. Not going to lie, I did do it in the past when I was young and stupid. But every single thing that I use is purchased and is licensed. So the virtual machine that you see on screen here, here we go. This virtual machine is correctly licensed. Everything is correctly licensed. I pay for all of the software that I use. So the easy option, yep, Jono I think has just highlighted the easy option. Thank you for the follow. Keeping track of this account. Thanks for the follow, mate. Yeah, so it might be easier to go, you know what, let's just spin up an AWS instance with these things so that I don't have to worry about it myself. So I might look into that. Now, we're not going to do that on stream today. I will go and prepare some environments for us to go and do the experimentation in, because that is not something that's particularly interesting to watch on stream. That'll just be me constructing a bunch of VMs with some default installations and going, okay, we've got some machines now, let's see if we can go ahead and run some code, okay? Don't know if they go back that far. That's fine if they don't, because we're looking to target Windows 7 and beyond, and anything that is that they don't have, I can quite easily spin up locally. So yeah, I mean, we've all watched plenty of Windows installations. I don't think I want to send everyone through that frustrating bit of pain, at least for today. So look, my gut feeling right now, just to be completely clear, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, is we can't target a single version and have it work everywhere. We just can't do that. Oops. We can't do that because we just can't assume that any particular version exists. So what does this mean? This means that we need to build multiple versions. So we need to have the ability from a code base to go, right, build, and it spit out versions that run on CLR version 2, CLR version 4, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Staging these things then become a little bit different, right? We're also in a scenario too where we may well kind of assume that the people who are using CLR Meterpreter have a pretty good idea of what that target version already is before they generate their payloads. So who knows? But just as some initial thoughts, behind the scenes, when we have components sitting on disk, Meterpreter components sitting on disk that Metasploit picks up and uses before sending down the wire, you have the core part of Meterpreter, which is called metserve.dll. And usually there's an architecture like this. You might also, like, so the 64-bit version looks like that, right? And then if you have an extension like the standard API, it's called ext server standard API.x64.dll. So that's kind of the format of what the native DLLs currently look like, okay? And every other platform has the same. So there'll be ext server standard API.py.php. All of these things already exist, okay? These are the components that are pulled apart and munged and changed and encrypted and whatnot and sent down the wire when Meterpreter is sort of being set up. Now, to me, in the back of my head, I was thinking if we had something like metserve dot version 2.0.dll, for example. Now, I'm just going completely off the top of my head here, and this is not how it will end up. But then you basically end up with this sort of thing. Oops, can't type. Where's my keys? There we go. Now, we don't necessarily need to pick up on every single little version. Like, we don't necessarily need to go, this is for version 4.5.1, 4.5.2, 4.5. Whatever. We just need to make sure that we target versions that aren't supported together. So you could bundle maybe 4.5 and 4.6 all into one, because you know that the runtime is going to support them both. So what we need to get an idea of is which runtimes support which versions, and then target what I would argue to be the highest version that runs on each of those runtimes, if that makes sense. So from there, when it comes to staging, we could say, oh, I know we're running on this version, and that's the one that you request. If you're generating payloads, then you would probably have to say, I want version 2 of the CLR, or I want version 4 of the CLR. So is that the version of .NET you're targeting, or the CLR version? Well, that's a really good question. I would say it would be the CLR version, because that's effectively what we're targeting. But then in cases like this, it's nuanced, right? If we target 3.5, we know that that's going to run on a .NET 2 CLR, but some of the dependent libraries might not be there, right? I thought there was a different version of the CLR that was later than that. Hang on, mate. Let me open this up. This is why we're having this discussion, right? We've got to fully understand what these things are. .NET CLR version history. No, not the framework. The CLR. We just want the CLR. Maybe it was already in here and we didn't see, or I didn't read it enough. So here we go. CLR version 1, 2, and 4. Okay, well there we go. There's the answer. So the CLR versions we need to target are 2 and 4. But So maybe then instead of saying that we need to target the highest, so 3.0 for example, or 3.5, targeting version 2 of the CLR, we target the lowest, because then we know it's going to run. Do you want to build a single version first, then work through the other versions all in one go? That's a good question. Do we want to do that? I would say that the code that we end up writing, if we start on the bottommost level, is going to be fairly portable when we push it back up. So it could be a case of we could build a version that runs on .NET 2, right? And then we can effectively just create a new project, wire all of those files in, and hit compile, and off it goes. That could work, right? So this is what I really want to understand. This is what I really want to focus on. We know for sure that if .NET 2 is installed and we target a .NET 2 version of the framework, then everything's going to be great. But we can't necessarily assume that if we target .NET 3.5, that is going to be installed on a target with a CLR version 2. If you start with CLR 4, it'll work on every new OS wise, and coming back to CLR 2 is for older deployments, which is basically, so the thing, I agree with that because, things do go end of life, but I also disagree with it because shit's going to still be around for a long time, and it's much easier to go ahead and build something that works on the old that will more than likely compile on the new than going the other way. Sorry, just got back from bedtime. It's been covered. Are we aware of any compatibility issues we want to have that isn't available with the lowest version of the CLR? When we're talking about CLR versions, the concern really is about mapping .NET framework versions on top of that. So .NET 3.5 runs on CLR version 2, but there are libraries that came with the framework that won't exist if all that's installed is .NET 2. But if we target .NET 2, we know that it will run on the CLR version 2 regardless of which version of the .NET framework is installed. Build a version that builds on 4, which gives the most coverage, but fun. Yes, it would be fun. I think it'll be fun regardless of the method that we choose. So, based on this discussion, we may find, we just have two versions, one targeting 4, one targeting 2, and out of the box, we focus on constructing versions that we know are going to work on the lowest version. I honestly think we should build for version 2 to begin with as well. And remember, this isn't... We still have the compiler version behind the scenes. We can be completely different. As long as we target the right version of the framework in the CLR, then we should be good. It doesn't mean that compatibility-wise that something can't be achieved in 2. I'm not sure what you mean by that then, Peleus. Are we aware of any not compatibility, capability that we want to have? The short answer right now, no. No, there is no capability that's missing. To be honest, a lot of the stuff that you see in the later versions of the frameworks tend to be objects that make certain things just a little bit easier to do, a little nicer. The API might be a little nicer to deal with, that sort of thing. If you start on CLR 2, then won't you miss out on things that will make newer deployments much easier? I know you want to support as much as possible going backwards, and filling in what doesn't work in 2 may be nice. I'm not a developer, what Peleus said, by the way, thinking about it. Do you start easy? Do you start earlier and go forward to the later versions, or do you start with the later versions and go back? So my feeling is this. My feeling is that we start with a .NET 2 version. We start with the .NET 2 version because I'm almost certain, based on my experience of building .NET apps, that the code will pretty much out of the box compile on .NET 4 without really having to change anything. I think there's a very good chance that we could go ahead and write something that targets .NET 4 and a bunch of stuff that will just not work if we decide to target a different version of the framework and the CLR. Agreed on starting with older version, otherwise you'll end up relying on a bunch of framework classes you won't have later. Exactly that. That's my concern too. Now, it doesn't mean to say that we won't make good use of any of the new versions or the new features that are on .NET 4 versus .NET 2, because we clearly will. But what we're looking to establish to begin with is a baseline that we know is more than likely going to have a minimal number of issues when we go from 2 to 4, rather than having arguably considerably more issues going from 4 back to 2. That's my feeling. I'm on the same page as Mongo there. But you may not have a bunch of things that make the new code easier and betterer. So can you give me an example, Jono? Make it faster in V4. Unlikely that much in 4.0 breaks code written for 2. That's exactly my point, but it's more likely to be the other way around. Because back compatibility, right? Microsoft have, they do tend to focus a lot on back compat, not so much forward compat. It's not a thing. No, I don't look at C# until Monday. Okay, all right. So, so my feeling is that we start with a version 2. It's it's clearly old. I mean, this was support ended already a while ago, but it's still worth deploying. And .NET 2, the CLR does exist on a lot of machines. So even if the thing was built yonks ago and it was targeted to machines that are end of life and whatnot, it still exists. People still put .NET 2 on Windows 10. There are so many apps out there that have been constructed for .NET 3.5 and .NET 2, and so you need to have that version of the CLR installed. So 2.0 should most, if not all, should do most, if not all of what we want to. Anyway, I agree. I agree. There's no doubt elements of the framework that are missing that would be lovely to have, but I don't think that we're going to need to worry about those until way down the track. The key points, as far as I'm concerned, is that we'll have things like generics in .NET 2, which is important because dealing with .NET 1's lack of generics was horrible. So, what do you guys think? Should we have a show of hands? We've got nearly 30 people sitting on stream. I can see a couple of opinions. I think it comes down from an attacker's perspective with a single option. No, nope. Absolutely, I'm not even going to read the rest of that. No, it's got nothing to do with the attacker's perspective. We're not talking about only building one here. We're talking about building multiple versions. It's going to be both 2 and 4. It's how we construct it that matters. So this is compile time stuff. This is not runtime stuff. So that the attacker's perspective thing at this point isn't relevant. So yeah, it's not about getting it to run on more environments. I guess maybe I conflated a couple of things there, and that may well have been misleading or confusing to you, Peleus. So don't think I'm dismissing what you're saying. What I mean to say there is people do install 2.0 on new machines. They do install 4.0 on earlier machines. But what we care about right now is, regardless of which one they do install, we have the ability to run at least one of them. And that means constructing multiple versions. And in constructing multiple versions, we want to minimize the pain of having code port from one version to another. So, hey, look, if in a perfect world we could rely on 4.7 or something existing on a target, then that'd be great. But welcome to the constraints that we have. So, it's a little bit of a shit, but there's not really much that we can do about it, right? We just because someone's running Windows 7, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to deploy a CLR version of Meterpreter on it. If anything, I think it'd be a good thing. So perhaps what we can do to begin with as part of a small experiment is build or just put together a very rudimentary project or solution that has version 2 and version 4 versions sitting there. Actually, let me show you this. Let me just sign into this VM. Password's incorrect, is it? No, it's not. All right, let's create a new project. Now, this VM is old insofar as that it has it doesn't have the version of Visual Studio that I'm going to be using, right? My password is Hunter2. Everyone's password is Hunter2, right? So looking at the version numbers on that screen, do you want to support targeting 2003? Yes, I do. I do want to support those. If you don't, it looks like the libraries in .NET 3 might be a starting point for your libraries. That would be nice, but I think we just need to start with 2. Is exactly what I think we should be doing. So anyway, so this is Visual Studio 2013. So it's clearly not the latest, but for all intents and purposes, for the sake of this current discussion, we should be able to at least go ahead and do what we need to. Now, check this out. On this version of Windows, currently I only have 4.5, and 4.5.1 installed. So I'm going to have to go and install .NET 2 framework, if I can. Windows a runtime. Well, isn't this interesting? Binger and Ida, no Ghidra icon. Yeah, well, you can tell it's an old version, right? Not sure I follow, to be honest. When you say compile time and runtime, can you give an example of where compile time and runtime could be different requirements? No, I can't. I absolutely can't. I'm not talking about compile time versus runtime with regards to a victim and an attacker choosing. Right now, I'm not thinking really about the attacker. What I'm saying is that I need to build a version for .NET 2 and I need to build a version for .NET 4. And I need to do that at compile time so that the binaries for Meterpreter are sitting on disk inside Metasploit so that the attacker can choose to use 4 or 2, or depending on the stager will be able to say, I know that I need to use .NET 2 or .NET 4 based on what I happen to be running in. That's kind of what I mean. So I'm not currently in the attacker's mindset. I'm in the developer's mindset, and I'm saying I need to build these 2 versions so that we have them both there, ready to go. Does that make sense? Might need an older version of Visual Studio too. Well, this version of Visual Studio is 2013. I would show you the version I've got on my desktop. In fact, hang on, I don't think I can. I'm trying my best to maintain some kind of OPSEC so that I don't expose stuff on my desktop that that you guys shouldn't be able to see. So just give me a second. I'm going to make sure. Docs incoming, yeah, that's what I'm worried about. Let's go. Let's see if this works. I don't know whether you'll be able to see it or not. Yeah. So this Visual Studio 2017. Now I'm only sharing this window, which means if I create, let's create a file, new project. I don't know whether you can see that. Now there's a window that's popped up in front of me that you can't see. Let me just have a look. So in this version, I can see .NET Framework 2, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4, 5.1, 4.5.2, 4.6, 4.6.1, 4.7, 4.7.1. So the compiler and the Visual Studio version is not an issue. Yeah, so it'd be nice if you could somehow say stream and include all of the sub windows of a window, but unfortunately it's not that simple because if you've got drop-down windows and pop-up windows, it's kind of hard to know whether they should be viewed or not. Okay, so I'm not Dan. Users OJ nudes. That's a different stream, Archbishop. But pay me lots of money and it could all be yours. Kind of. So you're saying we're going to have to make a version for each CLR no matter what. It's just a question of which direction of porting the code. Exactly that, Peleus. Exactly that. We need to build a 2.0. We need to build a 4.0. Do we build the 2.0 code and then compile it in 4? Or do we build the 4.0 code and compile it in 2? And I think we should be doing the former because back compat is a thing that Microsoft care about more so than forward compat because it's technically not possible. Peleus compile time is the building. Yep. Yeah, so which I keeping track of this account. I wonder who that is. Is that someone else who's been using another account? We don't know the name, but welcome regardless. But yeah, no, I'm pretty sure Peleus knows the difference between those two things. I think he's just a little bit confused based on the way I was discussing things previously as to what it is that I was referring to at the time. So let's go back to VMware. Sorry I couldn't share that. I will look into potentially sharing my desktop version, but I think the easiest thing for me to do right now would be to install Visual Studio 2017 onto this virtual machine so that we can do it all inside the VM and I don't have to worry about OPSEC. So, yeah. Thanks though, keeping track. I appreciate your input and please keep that input coming because it's all really helpful. So anyway, so are we in agreement? Like, is that the approach we're going to take? I personally think that's what makes the most sense. Once we've started constructing a version in 2, we can start pushing things into 4. I mean, it's hopefully a fairly simple process. 3 IDAs. Yeah. So that's the 32-bit version. That's the 64-bit version. They're both 6.9, and this is the free version of 7 point something. So yeah. 2 for the win. Yep. It's worth moving to VS 2019. That will include any new help. No, not really. If anything, I would be more against going to Visual Studio 2019 because my Vim plugin might not work. And if you think I'm building this shit without Vim, you are mistaken, my friend. You are mistaken. Never in a million years. It's Vim or GTFO. So that's what we'll be doing. But what I do need to do is figure out how to install .NET Runtime 2.0. But I think if we just install the runtime for 3.5 SP1, then we'll get the CLR version 2 anyway, right? So let's just pull that down. It's 231 meg. Really? Far out. Hang on a minute. How to remove programs. I should just do it this way, shouldn't I? I don't need to do it here. Oof. What a mess. Manage optional features. Is this where it was? Nope. It was... I even looked at a bloody post on this, didn't I? Over here. Where is it? How to enable .NET Framework version 2. Programs and features. That's where I went. Oh, it's Windows. Install .NET 2.0 on Windows. I can't believe I'm Googling for this. Live on stream. Here we go. God, I wish the scroll wheel would work. Yeah, so I have to go into Windows features. Oh, I just have to type Windows features. Why didn't you just say so? .NET Framework 3.5. Okay, well let's get rid of this. Do we want Comms Foundation? Yeah, no. Is there anything else in here that we need? PowerShell 2 we've already got. Let's just do that. Okay. 2019 gave me issues when trying to install WinDBG extensions. VS 2017 is good. I agree with that. Been getting a C#, F# environment set up for work, and I'll have people complain about Haskell. Yeah, go on, do whatever it is you need to do, Windows. So, what was I going to say? One of the things that we have to consider as well is that this needs to be able to be built by the build process that Rapid7 have in place. The current version of Visual Studio / MS Build that's used behind the scenes by Rapid7 to build the native version of Meterpreter is Visual Studio 2013. And I don't know whether that's going to change anytime soon. OJ, you can stop reading here. Okay, I'll stop reading there. Linux subsystem, yeah, if only, right? Vim. Vim is it's an abbreviation. Like VI was what it used to be called, right? Or VI. I think it's VI. And then because it was improved, it went to VI Improve, which is what Vim stands for. But yeah, man, I just can't live without that editor now, and the muscle memory is too strong. The plugin is VS Vim. No, it's not VS Vim. VS Vim is a half-baked implementation of Vim. I use something called VIMU. In fact, let me show you that. So VIMU is it's an extension that you can buy for God knows how many things. So there's the Visual Studio version, there's a Word version, there's a SQL Management Studio version, and this is written by a guy called John, who was he was a game developer, and he was one of the original developers of a game series called Commandos. I don't know whether anyone's ever played that game, or that series of games, but they were fantastic. So John is a fantastic individual, and VIMU is a fantastic piece of software. So I support John, and I buy this and maintain a valid license for this because it really is good, and it has features that VS Vim just doesn't have. Yeah. So this gets my thumbs up. Plus it supports a friend, so why not, right? Here we go. Windows completed the requested changes. All right, let's see if we can see it in Vis Studio now, or whether I actually need to go and install some other magic in order to make this work. A new project. Let's just go Windows Desktop. Let's say we were doing a console app. There we go. We got .NET 2, 3. We've got them all in there now. So these are the two we care about, right? .NET 4 and .NET 2. Easy done. So that's what we're going to end up doing. The thing that I'm really interested in is how are we going to share our code? So let's just make a test application now using .NET 2. Console app. Generate some crappy stuff for us. And we can build that. And as you can see, it works and does nothing. Now, what you can do when you go to the properties window is that you can actually retarget. You can say, I want to change the target to something else. And so when we change this to 4, it'll say changing the target framework means you've got to completely muck around with how the current wiring of references and everything happens. So rather than doing this, because the framework version is actually baked into the project, this is kind of what I was thinking of doing, right? If we create a new project alongside it, which is also the same type but targets .NET 4, right? Now you'll see in program.cs over here, there's only 3. Over here we've got 4. Why? Because we've got link, and link doesn't exist in .NET 2. So if we got rid of program.cs here, right? We just removed it, and instead I think we can add a. How do we do it? There's a way of linking. I'm going to do this for a minute. That copies it, I'm pretty sure. But there's a way of linking. Can anyone remember? Is there a look at the features? Yeah, well, it doesn't look like it supports 2019. Yep. What was the client options in that list? The client options in that list. Ah, you want to know about what client profiles are. Okay, we can talk about that. Add existing file doesn't copy. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Thank you. Add existing item, and you get to add it as a link, right? Add link. That's it there. So we can do this. Add as link. Boom, and there's that little icon there that shows that it's a link. So if I build this, that should be fine, and then hopefully build that, and that's fine too. So this is the kind of thing that I was thinking of doing. And I don't know how much of a nightmare / burden this is going to be. Thoughts? It doesn't, yeah, so it doesn't copy when you do the add as link thing. But this does mean that when you make a change and you rebuild, and you get both solutions building at the same time, so it will tell you whether you've broken something. Didn't know you could do that. There you go. Yeah, I haven't used that feature for ages, but it kind of allows you to just share source across your projects. So this is what I was I was thinking of doing. I don't know what kind of maintenance burden it's going to have, but I do think this currently makes sense. It just means that we can have a single source of truth for the code, and we're just basically using this to compile to target a different version of the CLR, which I think makes a lot of sense. It does mean that we've got to worry about adding the links constantly, which is a little bit of a pain in the butt, but I can't see a nicer way of sharing the code without having to constantly go, right, target a different version of the framework and do the different wiring of references and blah, blah, blah. That's basically what I'm talking about. Guessing you will need to copy any files that are changes you need to make that are specific to the different versions. Yes. Yeah, I think that's basically what's going to happen. We may also find that, as we progress, there are things that just do not make sense to share at all. And we can come to that, so long as the interfaces are the same. And that's maybe where we can provide some level of abstraction and go, well, you know what? In .NET 4, we've got a built-in library that'll do that for us. Let's just use that. So, Firefight, aren't there some build configurations to accomplish these? Well, yes and no. Yes and no. And to be honest, I would much rather have two completely separate projects than having kind of build configurations, because that's a little bit confusing. And like, if we go and create build configurations in here, hang on. So we can specify debug release, we can specify target. We can't specify framework versions in build configurations. We could probably hack it together with MS Build, but at the end of the day, MS Build is specific to the version of the CLR that you're running on. So to me, it makes a lot more sense to have different projects. Yeah. What happens to console app 1 if you add stuff that uses link? It won't work. It absolutely won't work. So if I say system.link. Let's just go. Let's do this. Okay, so here you go. It's a static type. I'm done. I look up of string. I'm just making this shit up to get something to compile. Okay, so we can see here that this one worked, but this one did not, because system.link does not exist in .NET 2. So you'll just basically get a compiler error in that regard. Create a makefile and a configure script. No, we're not doing that. I think this actually makes the most sense. And to be honest, the reason why I'm more keen on doing this is because more people are going to use Visual Studio to build this stuff, and I would like this to be in their faces while they're building it. I want them to be able to go Control-Shift-B, rebuild everything, and every single one of these binaries gets built, and if it doesn't work, they know about it before they can exit Visual Studio. So yeah. Anyway, we've got a couple of questions, specifically about. Hang on, where is it? It was @Wolf that was asking. Client profiles. Okay, so what is a client profile? A client profile is basically a thinned down version of the framework, as far as I'm aware. So let's ask the Googles. What is a .NET client profile? I'm pretty sure it's just a like on desktops, you don't necessarily need all of the features of a framework that would exist on a server. So there might be a bunch of server-related components. They could be, I don't know, let's say heavy Exchange plugins or something along those lines that you rely on to have in a server or a web application. But for the sake of just running a rich client app on a desktop, you don't need those things. So let's see what this says. Client profile is a subset which is provided with for and earlier and was optimized for clients. The .NET framework is developed platform. Blah, 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 blah. The client profile has been discontinued. And at the end of the day, there's probably no reason to care about the size excuse me, of the framework at this point. But so yeah, there were client profiles to reduce the size of the framework, and that just stripped stuff out that I think was specific to stuff that always existed on a server. But I don't think we need to care. To be honest, I don't think we need to worry about that. But does that answer your question? Oh. Has anyone made a version of Link for .NET 2? Nope. Not that I'm aware of. It's a huge job. Huge job to build Link. Are there lint tools for C# to kill anyone who introduces null? No, I don't think so. I mean, we could probably do something, but yeah, I think we're just going to have to live with that, Jono. Lucas, is there a list of current playing songs somewhere? Sometimes hear a tune I want to find afterwards. Are you listening to a playlist on Monstercat? I am listening to a playlist that I made on Monstercat, yes. I'm not using Monstercat Radio at this point, but I'm happy to share that list with you if you like. Maybe I'll post that in post that list somewhere alongside the repo, or maybe just chuck it in the Discord channel. Include a jerry-rigged version of the 2.0 code. So anyway, so just taking a little step back, is everyone happy? Everyone comfortable with the idea of targeting CLR2, CLR4, targeting the earlier versions of the .NET framework on both of those platforms, using whether it's VS 2013 or VS 2017. I'd probably prefer 2017 because it comes with a new version of the C# compiler, and we can use some more funky bits and pieces and probably get better optimized code. And taking this approach with linked files, at least to begin with, until it becomes cumbersome. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that's okay? So making Link work on .NET 2, remember system.link, if you look here. So Link is it's kind of like two things. One, it's a library, and two, it's syntactic sugar at the compiler level. So you can get hacks, I think, to get the compiler to generate the right code, but if you depend on any of the Link libraries and the .NET 2 runtime, you're not going to have any fun. Which sucks, because there's some really nice stuff in Link. If we could rely on .NET 3.5, then I think we've got Link in .NET 3.5. Then that would all be there, and it could get us to do some really nice functional style bits and pieces. But where that's missing, that's okay. We can quite easily put some of our own bits and pieces in. Actually, what version does extension methods come in? Does anyone remember what that is? Which version of .NET supports extension methods? Extension methods, cool. Yeah, Link came in 3. Alright, so what do we need to make good use of extension methods? I'm hoping that that's 2nd edition. Language feature that allows static methods to be called using. Yep, that's fine. Class defines sponsor class. Avoid frivolously defining extensions if you're in source code. Yeah, whatever. Just trying to find out. Here we go. What are extension? Aha, here we go. Under Visual 28, can't create an extension method working on .NET 2. Okay, so there's an ugly hack that I guess extension methods working .NET 2 would be better just upgrade to 3.5. So this is pretty key, right? So .NET 2 doesn't give us Link, and it doesn't give us extension methods, which is a little bit, they're really nice features, so it's shit not having those. So the question then becomes, going back to our .NET Framework version, Visual Studio 28. So we could make the executive decision right now, and we can say, no, we're going to stick with .NET 2, which means that we're going to support very early versions of the OS prior to Windows 7. Or we're going to go straight to 3.5, and the minimum version of Windows that we support is Windows 7. Because then we get extension methods, and we get Link, and we get some other nice bits and pieces. So what do you reckon? I knew you guys were going to say this. I had to nip out for a while before, so you might have missed this, but I saw you went over VIMU, and when it comes to the dev stages, is there a way for you to incorporate an on-screen keyboard logger to show the tricks and tips? I could do that. I'm happy to do that if that's something that most people will get a kick out of. It could be a little bit of a distraction, but yeah, if you want me to whack some kind of on-screen cue that shows what keys I'm pressing, then I'm happy to do that. Maybe I can get a vote, because that could become irritating. And I guess I could disable it if people don't want it. 3.5, 3.5. As a dev, 3.5. As an InfoSec person, 2. Yeah, it's kind of why I asked the question earlier about do you want to support 2000. Yeah, I know, Atwolf. I'm sorry, we are going a little bit full circle. Please don't think that I was just dismissing you. Peleus loves watching me suffer. 2.0, 2.0. Because of features in 3.8. Install a keylogger. Maybe something in the bottom corner would be cool. Yeah, you won't suffer, Peleus X. You're here to save the day. Secondary camera pointing at his keyboard. You know, it's funny you should say that. I do have a new camera coming, and I'm thinking of pointing this one at my keyboard. However, let me just, for those who have never seen, this is my keyboard. So, don't know whether that's gonna be useful. It's probably better to have on-screen cues. Yeah, on-screen keyboard. Yep. I don't know whether I'll have like a full on-screen keyboard that shows the buttons that I'm pressing, or whether I'll just have something that shows the last 10 characters that I've pressed, or something similar. Dustgood, yeah, I love my Dust keyboards. I've got 2, this one and my other one. They're both exactly the same, except one's, I think, brown and one's red. Can't remember. One's loud and one's not, but they're both the ultimate versions, which you can't see the keys on. And while I'm using one, I clean the other. And then when that's clean, I swap them and I clean. I'm just constantly rotating and cleaning the keyboards. And I've had both of these keyboards since like 2010. They are just absolutely magic. I love them. So it seems to me, yeah, that's right, browns and blues. I've got a brown and a blue, and I had the quiet one for the office and the loud one from home. And exactly the same. Well, Jono, they're not exactly quiet, they're just quieter. They're quieter. When I use these and I don't have my mic adjusted, it irritates a bunch of people. Okay, so now I saw a fairly even split, regardless of the reasons. I saw a fairly even split with 2.0 versus 3.5. So I think what we're going to do to begin with is we will stick with version 2 because, I mean, it's not really that much more pain, and I can't honestly say that there's a real need to have extension methods. Link does make certain things a lot more pleasurable, but we can and we will live without it. So we will stick for now with .NET 2. If we find that it's becoming too cumbersome, or it's holding us back, or we think that it's unrealistic to have to target machines that are going to run .NET 2 specifically without 3.5, then maybe at some point we can go, you know what, let's just move over to 3.5. I think the only thing that really stands out for me is the operating system version. So if we look again on screen at this table, .NET 2 doesn't get deployed by default with any Windows version, and we are assuming that the machines that we're targeting will have a deployment of it. We've already said that XP and earlier we're not going to bother with, and we're basically going from there and saying, okay, we will support .NET 2. But .NET 2 by itself is not, by default, installed on anything. Right? Does that make sense? 3.0 gives us Vista. When was the last time you saw a Vista box on a gig? You know what I mean? Functionality, speed, and capacity. Choose to. It is, right, on the server Windows. Sorry, yeah, on the servers, you're right. My bad. So the desktop, it's not. But it is on the server. Vista's your host, liar. Alright, .NET 2 it is. executive decision has been made. We will stick with .NET 2, and we will go from there, and we will wing it. Yeah, so we can see here, like, well, Vista gets 3. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. Like, Vista has 3.0, so should we target 3.0 and get extension methods and link? And that gives us, it bails on Windows 2003, but that's it. So if we said we wanted to, by default, and go with 2008, because 2008 SP2 and R2 SP1 have .NET 3 installed alongside Vista, then we get some good stuff. You've just lost one follower. Just story of my life, mate. So yeah, we can see that it's definitely included in Vista because the CLR version is 2.0. How many people run Windows Server builds without the service packs? That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. Lots. Vista SP1. Well, that's not what this says. Expression blend. Jeez, that was a mess. I remember those days. So yeah. Look, I'm open to doing whatever, and to be honest, for the first good chunk of code that we write, it's probably not going to matter whether it's 2 or 3 or 2 or 3.5. So thanks for coming along, Lucas. We're getting pretty close to finishing up. Like I said, I'm capping these streams at 2 hours regardless. So I'm being a good boy and I'm sticking to my guns because I don't want to burn out, and I don't want you guys to burn out. So I agree. That's exactly what I was thinking, Mongo. I agree with that. If we find a 2003 box, a native Meterp's probably going to run just fine on that as well. If it's 2000, if 2003 box is running a .NET application, I could almost guarantee you it's running 3.5. Geckham. Okay, let's run a vote. How about, shall I do a Twitter poll? Maybe I'll do a Twitter poll and say, should we support a minimum version of X, Y, or Z on Twitter? And I'll post it in the Discord channel, and I'll put it in the notes, and I'll let it run for 2 days, and we'll see what happens. Cool, thanks Archbishop, appreciate you coming along, buddy, as always. Look forward to the next time. Yeah, okay, I'll do a poll. But I think, like, collectively we're at least on the same page, right? We can see that, this is a constraint, that we actually have to make a decision. And once we've made a decision, we've got to live with it. We've got to live with it. At least to a point. Okay. Look, I think that's probably a fairly decent point to round things off. I know, again, we've spent more time discussing stuff, but I think, like, collectively we've got a better understanding of what it is that we're trying to do, where we're going to need to start, how we might structure our code, what tool sets we're going to use, all of that sort of thing. So I will jump, as soon as I finish this stream and I start uploading the video, I will jump online and I will set up a poll and I will share that in Discord, and hopefully we'll get some votes in. It may even spark some interesting discussion. So yeah, I think that's really good. And as always, you guys can quite at any point reach out to me if you want to talk more about this stuff. Anything that's discussed that's really important, we'll talk about on the next stream, so that nothing's lost in the video archives, because that's really important. So I think that's pretty much it. Does anyone have any other questions before we sign off, before we say our farewells? Because the plan for the next stream will be on Monday evening. Where did I buy my keyboard? Mate, I think it might have been PC Case Gear a long time ago. Because this is an older version, which I much prefer over the newer versions. Could you repeat the part where you said the things? Yes, the things. I hope that was helpful. All right, I'm going to take that as a yep, you've got no questions and everyone's happy. So thank you again to everyone who came along. I appreciate you giving me your Saturday evenings. I hope you got something out of it. And yeah, sing out if you've got any questions. Look forward to talking to you all again soon. And thanks as always for your support. So be good. Until next time.